Before the world was veiled in silence, before the fires of ancient wisdom were smothered by dust and dogma, there was a woman who stood at the crumbling edge of two worlds, the fading light of classical reason and the rising shadow of dogma. Not a queen, not a prophet, but something far more dangerous, a philosopher. Her name was Hypatia, born in Alexandria around 355 AD when the ancient world was already trembling. Rome was fading, the gods were dying, faith was becoming law. Hypatia was the daughter of Theon, a mathematician and astronomer, but she was no mere apprentice. She eclipsed her father's reputation, becoming a philosopher in a world increasingly hostile to philosophy. At a time when women were silenced, she taught openly. She lectured on mathematics, astronomy, and Neoplatonism, and she drew crowds. She walked where few women dared, into the library, into the lecture hall, into the geometry of the cosmos. She taught men and kings and those who would one day destroy her. She was a mathematician, not because numbers obey, but because they reveal. She charted the heavens, not to predict fate, but to touch the architecture of the eternal. She wrote commentaries on Diophantus and Ptolemy, not to impress, but to clarify. She believed that knowledge was a kind of reverence. To her, philosophy was not a theory, but a ritual. It was the soul's journey upward, a ladder of reason through a darkened world. It was the architecture of being. She did not worship the gods of old, nor reject the God of the new. Her altar was the mind, her prayer, contemplation, her sin, clarity. As a Neoplatonist, she believed in a single source, the one, from which all existence flows. Reality, she taught, was not chaos, but a layered unity. The material world was only the surface. Beneath it shimmered order, reason, and the divine. The task of the philosopher was not to dominate the world, but to understand it. Not to argue, but to contemplate. But Alexandria was changing. The streets grew louder. The faithful grew restless. The scrolls began to burn. And those who feared complexity began to crave certainty. To them, a woman who taught harmony became a threat. A philosopher became a sorceress. A thinker, an enemy. The Library of Alexandria was no longer safe. Ideas once shared across cultures were now threats. Alexandria, once a beacon of knowledge, was now torn by religious strife, Christians against pagans, old gods against the new. And in the center, a woman who refused to pick a side. She believed truth transcended sex, that wisdom needed no altar, that reason belonged to no single faith. And for this, she was dangerous. The governor of Alexandria, Orestes, was her student. The bishop Cyril saw her influence as a threat. Rumors spread. They said she was a sorceress, that she turned men from God, that she disrupted the divine order. They did not debate her, they silenced her. In 415 AD, a Christian mob dragged her from her chariot. They stripped her, they beat her with roof tiles, torn by hands that once scribbled notes in her lectures. They burned what remained. She was stripped not only of life, but of meaning. Her death was not a murder, it was an erasure. They did not just kill a woman, they killed a world. With her died a culture that sought wisdom through dialogue, not violence. A vision of the cosmos as something to be understood, not feared. After Hypatia, the ancient world dimmed. Philosophy retreated into monasteries, mathematics into silence. For centuries, her name nearly vanished. But they did not win. Hypatia was not forgotten, because ideas do not bleed. Wisdom, once whispered, cannot be unheard, and Hypatia's voice, buried in ash, still echoes. Because Hypatia was never just a person, she was a threshold, a bridge between what we were and what we still might become. She reminds us that thought is sacred, that questions are holy, that civilization is not inherited, it must be defended, every generation, with courage and clarity. She reminds us that truth is not inherited, it is earned, that philosophy is not a relic, it is rebellion, that to think is to risk everything. Today her name rises from the ruins, not as a saint, but as a signal, a warning, a hope, that in an age of noise there are still those who listen, that in an age of slogans there are still those who think. So when the world grows loud with certainties, when questions are mocked and nuance is drowned in slogans, remember her. Remember the last philosopher who stood not in temples or palaces, but in the open air, with chalk-stained robes and a mind alight with stars. Hypatia. If this stirred something ancient in you, a hunger for truth, a reverence for thought, a flame you forgot you carried, then share this light. Subscribe. Speak her name. Let the algorithm serve wisdom for once. Until next time, think dangerously, live deliberately, and never let the silence win.